What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. What better way to start the week than with an FPL Gameweek 31 wildcard guide? Now, I may do some more wildcard videos in the rest of the season, not every single week, but when people are tending to use it. But I do think Gameweek 31 is the last big week where a lot of people will be using the wildcard. You're going to see lots of content on it this week. So I thought I would do a guide, and it's going to be a fairly long one. I want to go through shortlists, things to consider, my must-haves, and obviously some draft tinkering at the end. I'll try and put in the chapters that you can skip ahead if you want to, but hopefully you'll enjoy the whole video and watch the whole thing. If you do enjoy it, please do give it a like, hit subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll jump into it. So we've only got 8 weeks left. Really, when you use a wildcard, you want it to be good for at least a few weeks. Yeah, I still see people kind of put off using it, and for various reasons. Like, first of all, this is not a blanket guide to say that every team who's got a wildcard needs to use it this week, because your team will look different to mine, which will look different to the next person, and therefore you might not need to actually use it, right? So by using it in Game Week 32, for example, you dodge a few fixtures. So if you wanted to hold Man City players for Leeds in Game Week 31, perhaps you've got Gundogan, for example, but you don't want to hold him long term. Perhaps you haven't got Fernandes, you don't want to bring him in versus Spurs, you can skip that. Maybe you've only got 1 or 2 Spurs players, but you actually want 3 for the double in 32. Well, you don't probably want to bring them in for the Man United game. That's probably going to be 0-0, the way the games Man United have had against the top 6. So you could delay the wildcard until Game Week 32, then bring all those players in. So Kane against Burnley, and then he plays Leeds. You can bring in Kane, Son, and whoever it might be for the double in 32. You can get rid of all your Man City players. So there's loads of different ways you can play that. Game Week 33 wildcard, so you could wait until the doubles happen and then switch out Man City and Spurs players if you don't want them long term. And Game Week 34 is kind of similar. So I saw FPL Partridge on Twitter talking about this. So he has a strategy where he's going to keep his team. He's then going to sell the Spurs players and Man City players. I can't remember which in Game Week 33 when they blank. Then he's going to wildcard them back in without the Man City players, but wildcard back in Kane and Son or whoever it might be. Because they play Sheffield United and Leeds. So there are different ways you can play it. Just because everyone else is using it in Game Week 31 doesn't mean you have to. Obviously, there's quite a few fixture swings this week, both in terms of teams starting to have good fixtures, but also teams starting to have bad fixtures. So even like Leicester, for example, people might be looking at Vardy or Iheanacho or Schmeichel or whoever it might be. They still play West Ham in Game Week 31. It's not completely easy. They're really good fixtures start in Game Week 32. So you might want to delay it, right? And I'm not telling you which way is right or which way is wrong. You have to decide that for your own team. But not everybody's team is in the same position. Not everybody needs a wild card this week. Obviously, the only other thing to consider as well is future double game weeks. So there's all this talk about them trying to get fans into stadiums, which might cause blanks and then double game weeks for certain teams. Now, they have already okayed fans. I can't remember how many in for the EFL Cup final for Spurs versus Man City. I think they're calling that a test. Now, that is in Game Week 33. So if that goes well, they could then move on to having fans in the stadium before the end of the season, which would be great, right? I think we would all agree that would be good. And that could then mean there's future double game weeks. So you could save it. But the thing is, that's not going to probably happen until Game Week 35. Yes, if there's enough disruption, your wildcard could be in a good position. But chances are you already have some of those teams covered anyway. Some of the doubles, I think, will be caused by FA Cup semi-finalists or something like that. I saw Ben Crennan talking about, which means that there's already a chance of rotation anyway. So I'm not convinced about saving it that long, but you could do that if you wanted to. And the other thing to consider when you're making your wildcard, right, whether you're using it this week, next week, or whatever, is the amount of transfers you got booked in. Personally, I wouldn't want to be already setting my transfer strategy up for the next 3 or 4 weeks. It's good to have a plan, a rough plan of players you want to bring in. But if you've already got a transfer booked in, like, let's say you use it in 31, and you got a transfer booked in for 32, 33, 34, 35. You probably need to be a little bit more flexible than that. Chances are most players that you'd put in Game Week 31, you can just hold them through Game Week 32. We are going to talk about some punts right? You could keep a player for 31 as a punt against Leeds, for example. You could go for a Man City player and then take them out for 32. That is an option. But where possible, especially with all the blanks and potential future doubles coming up, you want to start saving some transfers at some point. So do not book in too many transfers. So that's some things to consider. Let's look at all the shortlists. I'm going to go through each position individually. So goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards. Then we'll look at my must-haves, and then we'll do the tinkering right at the end. Okay, so we'll go through the goalkeeper shortlist first, and no pun intended, but some of these lists will be shorter than others. And with goalkeepers, I also want to talk about rotation and backup keepers and stuff like that as well. But we'll come on to the shortlist first. So Arsenal's fixtures are pretty good, right? In fact, they're really good until the end of the season from a defensive point of view. From the sounds of it, Luiz is out and Holding could come back in. Holding did really well earlier in the season. I actually owned him over that kind of game week 18, 19, 20 period. And he actually kept a few clean sheets. And Arsenal looked all right. And I think they've looked good at times this season. But recently it's not translated into clean sheet points or into any kind of points at all. But I wouldn't let that put me off completely. So I do think you should consider Leno, even if you don't necessarily put him in your final team. Mendy, definitely. You're going to hear me talk about Chelsea defenders a lot. That West Brom game would not put me off whatsoever. They are still a top 3 defence. I would still have at least one, whether it's a goalkeeper or a defender in my team, because the fixtures are just that good in the medium term. So the next 4 are really good. The 4 after that are a little bit more difficult. So that's one thing to consider. But Chelsea is such a good defence that they can keep clean sheets either way. Schmeichel and Patricio actually are kind of in case you want to back those defences for maybe a little bit less money, or just because you haven't got a spot in the outfield, right? So, or in your defensive positions. Outfield just sounded weird when I said that. It sounded like something like an American sports person would say. I don't know. Let me know. I'm not going to edit that out. So let's say you didn't have a spot for Cody, Sice, or whoever it might be. You might go for Patricio because Wolves fixtures are quite good, and so are Leicester's, right? A lot of people looking for Leicester's attackers, but you could go defensively as well. I stuck Martinez in there because I'm sure there's some people thinking about keeping him. Personally, if you're just going for one goalkeeper, I think there's much better fixtures you can target. I know he's been great, and even though he didn't get a clean sheet this weekend against Fulham, he's still got 4 points. But there are much better fixtures to play for. So he's on the shortlist, but I probably wouldn't go for him. Lloris obviously has a double game week. So outside of Kane or Son, people are probably looking for a third Spurs player. And I think the shortlist is probably Lucas Moura, Reguilon, or Lloris. So Lloris isn't a bad option. The problem is he doesn't play in game week 33. So you've got to think of a backup plan. Now, one player I've not put on here, because I don't really put the periphery players on the short list, is Forster. Now, Forster would 100% be on my wildcard as a backup keeper. He started 4 of the last 5 games, so hopefully the number 1 jersey is his now. It's definitely not worth paying 0.1 less for Fabry, like I did whenever I made my transfers to get him in. I can't remember when it was. It was to get De Bruyne in or something like that, and I had to get Fabry in. And I didn't go for Forster, and I could have, and I wish I had now. So I'd definitely go for Forster. He's just not on the shortlist because he's like a backup. The problem is, if you go for Lloris and Forster, they both blank in game week 33, so you're still stuck with no keeper. So if you've got your free hit, then it's a bit different. If you don't, I'd strongly think about that. And the last keeper is Fabianski. Now, West Ham's fixtures are good. That's why I bought Dawson in a few weeks ago. But, and just before I've kind of started recording this, there's rumours going around for West Ham that Declan Rice could be injured. And we're not talking just for one game. Apparently he's out for the Wolves game at least. But they're also saying he's hoping that he doesn't miss out on the Euro. So it could be a bit of a long-term injury. He would be a massive miss to West Ham. I don't even know who would come in. Mark Noble probably. And Declan Rice is a big step above Mark Noble at this point in time, right? The amount of work that Rice does to win the ball back, to distribute it, he's a huge part of the way West Ham play. And I don't know if that would let me put me off West Ham players completely, but I do think in the case of Fabianski, you can get the likes of Dawson or Sofal for a little bit cheaper, so I'd probably opt for an outfield player instead of a goalkeeper. But that's the shortlist. Just a really quick one on rotation. So I'm not against it at all, but I feel like you have to have a lot of money, and don't fool yourself that because you bought Martinez for cheap, he's only costing you X amount of money. Like, if you bought him for 4.7 and he's now 5.3, then you can sell him for 5 million. So you're not just taking up 4.7 million in your budget, you're taking up 5 million, because if you sell him, 5 million is what you would get back, right? So I've seen a lot of people already saying that to me. Well, he's only costing me 4.7 or 4.8. He's costing you whatever you could get for selling him, right? That is what he's costing you. And one thing with rotation is you have to look at how many times you are playing both keepers, right? If you've got 8 fixtures and you've got a really good rotation and each keeper plays 4 times, fair enough. But the Leno and Martinez combination, which I've seen a lot of people going for, which would probably cost you about 10 million, basically. Instead, you could have a 5 million keeper plus Forster for 9 million. That's a lot of money saved. The highlighted green fixtures in this case are the games where you would play Martinez. So you're only playing Martinez twice, and the West Brom game, Leno has Everton anyway. So the question is it worth 1 million extra of your budget to have Martinez in those 2 games? Like, how many points are we expecting him to score over Leno? Maybe it'll be worth it. Maybe he absolutely smashes it in those 2 fixtures, but I doubt it's worth the extra money. When I see the price of the attackers people are going to try and fit into their teams, most people, unless they got ridiculous team value, are going to struggle to be able to have a goalkeeper rotation. So not against it, but definitely consider how many times you're playing each goalkeeper and how detrimental it is to the rest of your team. Okay, so the defender list is a little bit longer, and I've actually got up on my other screen while I'm doing this the non-penalty XG per game conceded by all teams, right, just to see where teams lie. I've taken out penalties. We could include them, but for this purpose, I've taken out the penalties conceded. So Wolves are still looking like a top 5 defence on the numbers, right? I know the clean sheets haven't come, and this is where you want to either bet your gut instinct, you want to go for the stats, you want to go for your eye test. I'll leave that up to you. But to me, with the fixtures they've got coming, Wolves still look like a pretty good bet. They're not completely safe from relegation either, it's worth saying, although we'll have to see what they do against West Ham tonight. I don't think I would pay more than Sice or Cody. I definitely wouldn't go up to Bolly. Semedo maybe if you wanted to go for one of the wing backs, but I'd probably just save my money and go for Cody, just take the cheapest. With Arsenal, their numbers not looking great. I mean, they're in the top half. They're close to Leicester. Then Man United are a bit further down. Then West Ham, Spurs. So Arsenal defence looking okay, nothing special. And I'm sure the fact they've conceded 6 goals in their last 2 games, the league games at least, and making people kind of hold off a little bit. As I said with the goalkeepers, hopefully Holding will do or will help Arsenal defence become a little bit more stable, and Tierney will have to wait and see what the injury extent is. But they're the 2 players that I would consider. Chelsea I'm definitely going for. I wouldn't... The way they play, it's usually the 3 centre-backs, Azpilicueta on the right, Thiago Silva in the middle, and then Rudiger on the left. And then either Zuma plays on the left as well, or instead of, or Christensen seems to play in the centre coming in sometimes for Thiago Silva, right? So it's not necessarily a case of like Zuma's suddenly going to play central, Rudiger's going to play on the right. That's kind of how they've set out. Now, Azpilicueta still has not missed a minute in the league, so if you've got enough money, he might be worth paying for. I'm still backing the Chelsea defence. Like, looking at these numbers, they are the number... They're actually joint second with Brighton in terms of how good their defence is on XGC conceded per game. So I definitely want one. I still think Rudiger's worth looking at. There's all this talk about training ground bust-ups and stuff like that. That's already water under the bridge, apparently. He only missed the last game, I'm going to assume, because of the minutes in the international break. So hopefully he plays Champions League, then carries on playing in the league. He does have the chance of missing a game every now and again, so he's not completely nailed on. And neither is Alonso. Alonso's a massive punt. For me, I wouldn't go there on Wildcard. It's just too much money for a player you can't guarantee he's going to start every game. But he's on the shortlist, but I think Azpilicueta or Rudiger is where I would go. I've put Villa on there just in case you need a player for like Game Week 33, for example, depending on your strategy. Maybe you need a defender to come in just for that game, or the one in Game Week 36. So Konza or Target could be options there. Reguilon for the double game week. I think he's probably the best option outside of Son and Kane right now. Again, West Ham defence, caveats applied. Declan Rice looks like he's going to be out. How long for? We don't know yet. Dawson, Sofal, Cresswell on there. And I've put in Shaw for Man United. A lot of people liking him. He's very attacking. And Man United's defence is looking okay. What are they? They're like tops 5, 6, 7, 8th best defence in the league so far this season, looking on underlying numbers. So it hasn't been that pretty, and at times they have got a mistake in them. But I think if you're going to go for a United defender, they've got some good fixtures coming up. Then Shaw's probably there, and Castagna's probably the outfield defender I would want from Leicester if I wasn't going for a Schmeichel or something like that. So quite a long list. I think Liverpool definitely, Chelsea definitely, Reguilon would probably be on my team as well, which we'll come on to in a minute, and then probably Wolves after that for me. Let me know below which defenders you're considering. So moving on to midfield and forwards, the list definitely gets smaller. So Liverpool massively on my mind. So Salah, Mane, Jota. I think for most people, no one is going for Mane over Salah, and I don't think a lot of people will go for Salah and Mane because it's too much money. So Jota has to come in. I just think he looks great. He's going to be on my must-haves in a minute. Man City, De Bruyne and Gundogan. Obviously, rotation is going to loom now for Man City, as it always does. But even more so now. Like earlier on in the season, De Bruyne was getting rested in the Champions League group games and playing every single Premier League match. It's probably not going to happen now. We've just seen him play against Leicester. I'm going to assume he plays in the Champions League. Then he could get benched against Leeds, which is a worry. Gundogan, on the other hand, has just missed the Leicester game. He'll probably play the Champions League game, almost definitely. And I still think he could play the Leeds game as well. So he might be worth keeping in your side. There are other Man City players you could consider, which I'll come on to in the draft, like Mahrez and players like that. And maybe it's a little bit harsh to leave them out of the shortlist, but those are the two that I would probably look at. Saka at Arsenal, for me, if he can stay fit and he plays every game, and there is obviously a worry with Arsenal that as the top four becomes out of reach, that they will concentrate on the Europa League. But if his minutes were the same as Lingard, I would definitely prefer Saka to Lingard. I've only put Lingard on here because I don't want to get lynched in the comments. Son definitely in. Rafinha, for me, he's a player that people will consider keeping because they got cheap. They don't want to lose the money. They can play him at the end of the season, but for me, the fixtures aren't good enough for Leeds for me to warrant keeping him. I think you can do better things with your midfield. And just remember, you can bring a player back once you sell them. So I know you lose a bit of money, but for me, Rafinha can probably go, but he'd definitely be on the short list. Fernandes, of course, and then Neto to cover those Wolves fixtures. I think he is the best attacker in that team. There are lots of rumours that Jimenez might be back, mostly because apparently he's transferred him back into his own, or transferred himself back into his own FPL team. There's that account. You see it blew up because, it kind of leaked after the deadline, all the Aston Villa injuries and stuff like that. So many players had taken out Grealish. That same account is tracking Raul Jimenez, and he apparently has brought himself back in to his own team. So we'll see what goes there. Maybe we'll consider it. But let's quickly go on to forwards, and then we'll start looking at must-haves, and then we'll get onto the tinkering, I promise. So the forward shortlist, right? Obviously, there's only 3 spots to pick anyway. But are you thinking about, if you're wildcard, are you considering going for any more than these 4 teams and these 5 players? So Bamford at Leeds. And again, like Rafinha, I think you could probably leave him out, to be honest. Vardy, Iheanacho, Antonio Kane. If anything, this is pointing towards maybe going 3-5-2. We'll come on to the tinkering in just a sec. But Kane definitely, like 100% would be in my team. Then Antonio, I think the fixtures still look good. The Declan Rice thing, I guess, affects them going forwards as well. But they do have, a lot of good players in there, not just Declan Rice. Obviously, Souček's still going to do the box-to-box job. So I wouldn't be put off Antonio too much just yet. Vardy and Iheanacho, like from Game Week 32, the fixtures look good. Arguably, even from 31 now, if Rice is going to miss that game, could be decent. But otherwise, it's Calvert-Lewin, but the fixtures aren't great. Watkins, but the fixtures aren't great. I guess both of those will have an extra fixture at some point. But I don't think it's worth putting them in right now in the hope that double is soon, because it doesn't look like it's going to be until at least after Game Week 33. It could be 35, 37, whenever it might be, I don't know. But I don't think it's worth putting them in their team. So the shortlist for players up front is very low. Let's quickly look at the must-haves, and then we'll start building the draft. These are my must-haves, right? That doesn't mean I think they're essential, but if I was wildcarding, these players would 100% be in my draft come the deadline, depending on injury, right? If they get injured, fair enough. It changes things. So Harry Kane, great captain choice, right? One of the things I would definitely do on your wildcard is go and look at who you're thinking about captaining and make sure you've got all those bases covered. Like people last night in the stream said I had an agenda about Fernandes. It's absolutely not the case. I just don't see too many times where I'm going to captain him from now until the end of the season. So that would then come into my thinking about whether I put him in my draft or not. Kane, absolutely zero doubts. Game week 32, definite captain. Sheffield United in 34, Leeds in 35. There's plenty of opportunities to captain Kane. Son, absolutely nailed, unlike Bale, unlike Lucas Moura probably to an extent as well, and has got the double game week, so he would have to be in for those reasons alone. Long term, obviously, he could go, but again, if you can cover him in game week 33, then those fixtures in 34, 35 are decent. Salah, great fixtures. Captain opportunities as well. I don't know how many times I'd actually captain him, potentially in game week 31. Like, if you're worried about Man City rotation, Salah plays Villa. There aren't too many other options with Fernandes playing Spurs, and obviously Kane plays in that game too. So Salah definitely up there. Jota, same fixtures, such good value. And then lastly, I put Azpilicueta, but basically it would be a Chelsea defender. They're a top 3 defence. I mean, top 2 if you think that they and Brighton are joint, right? And their medium-term fixtures, so the next 4 are really good. There should be plenty of clean sheets there. I'm not put off by that West Brom game at all, which I've said a million times now. So they are my kind of 4 players plus 1 bases covered at the bottom with Azpilicueta. So basically covering the Chelsea defence in one way or another. Let's start tinkering. Okay, so we're going to start building the draft, right? And there's going to be different players that I switch throughout, but I've obviously I had to start with my must-haves, right? I can't say that I've got a list of must-haves that would be absolutely in my wildcard team and then not also include them in the draft, right? So Kane, Son, Jota, Salah, and a Chelsea defender. Now, I've gone for Rudiger. As always, right, as ever, my buy-in and sell-in price might be different to you. I got Rudiger at 4.6. If you don't already have him, you might have to pay 4.7. I've also cropped the screen like this so I can easily show you the fixtures for the players as well, right, for the rest of the season if I'm talking about fixtures. Now, straight away, one thing I'm going to do is put in Forster. For me, I'm not going to be, if I was wildcarding, right, I wouldn't be rotating goalkeepers. So Forster would be straight in. Now, we'll come on, the other goalkeeper, I'd probably go Mendy, right? I probably would. 5.2 million. Leno would set you back less money. The fixtures, like I said just a minute ago, so Palace, Brighton, West Ham, Fulham are all pretty good, right? West Ham, okay, is maybe the trickiest one of the bunch. I know Fulham scored against Villa yesterday, but overall, Chelsea defence is so good that I would probably back them to get clean sheets in all 4 of those games. Will they get 4 clean sheets? Probably not, but we're obviously trying to play the odds. So those 4 are good. Then it's Man City, Arsenal, Leicester, and Villa, right? They've all got players that can score goals. They're all fairly good attacking teams, especially kind of Leicester, Villa, Man City, and Arsenal as well to a certain extent are right up there too. So I'd be more worried about them. If you wanted to go, I wouldn't say safer because the defence just isn't as good, but you could go for Leno. Because if you look at the fixture, this is one of the reasons I bought Tierney in. Sheffield United, Fulham, decent. Everton, not too bad. Newcastle, West Brom, good. Palace and Brighton, good too. Chelsea's the tricky one. Everton probably to a certain extent, and Brighton even maybe as well. But they've got really favourable fixtures, so you could just stick Leno in, right? One of the big questions is around Man City. So I think one of the things to do before you confirm any of this is see who lines up in the Champions League game against Dortmund, right? So Gundogan's probably going to be in there, De Bruyne is going to be in there, but it'll be interesting to see who they play up front, and does Mahrez play? If Mahrez doesn't play in that Champions League game, there is a good chance that he plays against Leeds, and Leeds is a great defence to target. So I'm not saying that Mahrez has to be in your team long term, but if he doesn't play in the Champions League, there's a good chance he plays against Leeds. And to be honest, the other Champions League game is then before Villa. So who knows? Is he going to start in the EFL Cup final? I think he probably will. But there is a chance that he plays both of these games, right? And if you look at his minutes, I don't know if, I can scroll all the way down. He's only missed 1 game or 2 games in the last, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Having to do counting live. 2 games in the last 11. So it's not ideal. You want him to play every single week, but there's big points potential there. So if you wanted to book a transfer and you could put him in and then maybe take him out after the Leeds game, whatever it might be. But keep an eye on that. If you're the kind of person that wants to go for a fairly safe wild card, and I do hate that word because basically what you're saying is you're picking players that you think are going to score, but you want to go for 1 or 2 maybe punts, then Man City against Leeds could be the way to do it. I think I would probably go for a third Spurs player in my team. So Reguilon would probably be the one I go for. Lloris is 5.6 million. It's a lot of money. there's no point in having Forster as backup. I mean, not that there's no point, but for Game Week 33, it doesn't help you. So with this combo, at least like if Leno's got some really awful games. So let's have a look, because I've not actually checked this, right? So Chelsea away in Game Week 36. Does Southampton have a good fixture in Game Week 36? They play Fulham at home. So that is better, right? So potentially also, by the way, Forster has a double game week probably because Crystal Palace at home has to be rearranged. And if it's not put into 33, which I don't think it will be because they've already announced the Game Week 33 fixture times on TV, then at some point in these games, he's going to have a double game week. So it makes absolute sense to put him in. And to be completely honest with you, I hate that I haven't put him in. It's so annoying. It's these little things that are really big on Wildcard, is having those kind of players. So Leno and Forster is probably not a bad choice. So I'd have Reguilon instead of Lloris, because you can always sell Reguilon. You're not going to be so necessarily up for selling a goalkeeper or using a goalkeeper transfer. So I'd probably have Reguilon. Elsewhere, because I've got Leno, there's no way I'm doubling up on Arsenal defence. So then you have to choose between kind of going for Wolves or whoever it might be. So Cody looks pretty good. The only reason that I would go for another Arsenal defender is because David Luiz, unknown return date, which I can't show you. It won't scroll up far enough. But that is bad news. But it does mean Holding will probably come in. And he's only 4.2 million. So it is a cheap way into another defender. And on that point, depending on whether you're going to go 3 up front or 3-5-2, I probably would cheap out on my midfielder as well. I don't know if I would go for an attacking front 8. So you could go for Smith Rowe in midfield. He's only 4.2 million, so it takes a lot of money out of your midfield. Yes, you haven't got that rotation spot, so a lot of us recently have had like Gundogan, Antonio, Bamford and Rafinha. We've had to bench one most weeks, but it does give you lots of options. I'd be tempted to go without that going forward. The other discussion then is I would probably go for Antonio as my striker. I would definitely go for him ahead of Bamford. I guess before you finalise this, right, you're going to get to see this Wolves game. I wouldn't necessarily put too much emphasis on one game without Rice, but he is going to be a miss. Leicester at home, Newcastle away is pretty nice. Burnley's decent enough. Brighton's not great. I actually think Brighton away is harder than Everton at home, to be honest with you, from an attacking point of view. And then West Brom and Southampton to end. Obviously, one of the caveats is, can Antonio last that long without getting injured? Hopefully he can. And then the big question here is, so you've got to have another defender. For now, I'm just going to put one in. I'm really conscious of putting in a defender that I've not put on the shortlist, because that would be really stupid of me to do. I'm just going to double check here on my other screen. Yeah, so I don't think there's anyone I'm going to put in. Originally, I would have had a West Ham defender in. Again, we might think about changing that, but for now, I'm going to put Dawson in because that's who I've got in my own team. Then you've got 20.4 million to spend. Now, most people are going to be drawn to a Man United midfielder by the name of Bruno Fernandes. That leaves you 8.8. So straight away, I'm thinking you go for a cheap striker. Iheanacho is definitely up there because Barnes is going to be out for a little bit longer. Maddison is back. Now, I know during the last game, Iheanacho came off and Perez stayed on when Maddison came on, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be it going forward. So you could just go for Iheanacho at 5.8. And then you have kind of got, but you'd have to play him every week because you've got Smith Rowe. But you've got 3 million to spend. So you could carry on with the way that a lot of us have played recently, which is having a strong bench. And obviously, you wouldn't necessarily do Smith Rowe to a 7.2 million midfielder. It could be Gundogan, it could be Lingard, whoever it might be. So let's just put Lingard in for argument's sake here. Everyone's favourite. So Jesse Lingard's in. Then you've still got 1 million to spend, which you could upgrade a defender for example. And if Iheanacho does lose his place, you've still got 5 attackers here and 2 attackers. So you've still got 7 you can play every single week. The thing with Iheanacho is, if they keep playing this formation with 2 up front, he and Vardy, then when Maddison comes back, he could just take Perez's place. Barnes would be my biggest worry, because then they switch formation completely. They might have like a front 3 or whatever it might be, with Barnes kind of either side, so not on both sides, but on one side of Vardy and Maddison kind of in behind, like maybe a 4-2-3-1. However they deploy it, right? But at this point, it looks like Iheanacho might keep starting. And West Ham's fixtures are so good, right? West Ham away, potentially with no Rice. West Brom at home, Palace at home, Southampton away, Newcastle at home. These 4 or 5 or maybe even 4 fixtures, depending on how you look at it, from 32 onwards, are really good, right? And I'm not really too keen on Maddison. I think I'd rather go for a striker because there's so many midfield options, and that to me there aren't too many forward options. The other option is to go for Vardy. So I'm moving my drink around because as I'm doing this, it's in my way of looking at the screen. So you could go for Vardy, but obviously that's very difficult to get him and Fernandes. Like, even if you go for Smith Rowe in midfield, you still got to make up 1.3 million. Now, some of you will have 1.3 million spare, so you could go for Vardy, Kane, Fernandes, Son, and Salah. For me, I would have to drop down Reguilon to someone crazy cheap. Like I don't know who it would be, but someone like Davern or someone at 4.2, or maybe even like a Mitchell at 3.8, and hope he gets his place back. But this just feels a little bit too cheap. Obviously, one player I've completely missed out is going for a Liverpool defender, right? So you could just put Phillips in. I completely forgot about him. He's actually the 4th highest scoring Liverpool defender. That's absolutely mad. So this way, you could have Fernandes, Antonio, Kane, Vardy, Son, Jota, Salah. You'd play them every week and you'd bench Smith Rowe. This defence just feels a bit flimsy because if you get any issues, you've got no money to upgrade it, then you're going to have to start downgrading midfielders. So that's my only worry about it. Realistically, you have to make a choice between Fernandes and Vardy. Now, I don't own Fernandes right now, but Burnley at home and Leeds away is pretty good, although Spurs away and Liverpool at home is not that great. So I don't foresee too many points there. Villa, Leicester, Fulham, Wolves, probably not too bad. So overall, Fernandes is good. A brave person will back Vardy instead for these fixtures. And I think there's some merit in doing that. There's been a lot of discussion about effective ownership recently, about whether you should factor it in. And I'm all for calculated risks, right? Fernandes versus Vardy is tough because Fernandes gets the extra point for a clean sheet, extra point for a goal. They're both on penalties. But if Vardy did win out and you went for him over Fernandes, that could be a decent rank increase. It's just whether or not you're happy with backing against Bruno Fernandes. But at this point, I would definitely go a little bit more kind of expensive in my defence. So even if you wanted to go for, again, let's put Jesse Lingard back in for now, even though I don't think I would necessarily go for him. You still have 9.8 million to spend on this spot, whoever it might be. It could just be Neto, by the way. Like you could just put Neto in and go cheap. So then you've got to pick 7 of these 8 every single week. But you've still got 4.1 million spent. So instead of Phillips, you could go up to Trent Alexander-Arnold if you wanted to go for him. Because once again, we'll just quickly look. Like, how ridiculous are these fixtures? They are so good. How have I not got 3 Liverpool already for these? I'm hopefully going to have 2 in my own draft. And then you've got 0.8 million to spend. So that could be Leno to Mendy. It could be Leno to Lloris. It could just be upgrading Holding to like a 5 million. There's loads of options you could go for. I think this one, if you're willing to back Vardy over Fernandes, otherwise you just get Iheanacho and you put Fernandes in here. I think there's enough money for that. I should probably end up on a draft because I've been talking for over 10 minutes already. So let's put Fernandes in here. This will be the last little bit. Then Iheanacho, and then you can't afford Trent as well. So they are really the key decisions that you have to make. But you can put Reguilon in. So it depends what you want to do. Do you want to back the double game week for Spurs and then not have to worry about game week 33? If you don't, you could afford Vardy and Trent at the expense of Fernandes. That is a big call though. But I think I'll probably go with something like this. I think Kane, Antonio, Jota, Salah definitely locked in. And Son as well. Probably Fernandes if you're worried about Man City rotation. But obviously, Kevin De Bruyne, Gundogan, Mahrez, whoever we think plays in 31 could be a good option. In defence, I think I will go Wolves and Chelsea for sure. Double Arsenal, I'm not too happy about, to be completely honest. I'd probably rather, if I'm going to go for Holding, I would probably swap Leno to Mendy, to be honest with you. Dawson, obviously, Reguilon, then you've got your triple Southampton. You're pretty flexible. Obviously, you've got transfers to cope with any more double game weeks anyway. So if Southampton get a good double of Crystal Palace plus whoever else the game gets put in with, You could bring Danny Ings in for Kane or Antonio if you've got the money, whatever it might be. But that's the kind of draft thinking. They are the players that I would be thinking about. There's not too many players outside of this that I would go for. You could go for Saka or Neto instead of Lingard. But a draft like that is probably how I would put my funds. But let me know in the comments below what you hate about it. So that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed it, please do give it a like and hit subscribe if you're new around here. Obviously, I might do another wildcard video before the deadline, maybe more of a confirmed draft with less kind of talk about all the players and stuff like that. Maybe I'll even try and get someone on who is wildcarding this week. We'll see what happens, but hopefully that was useful. Obviously, let me know down below if you've got any other questions and stuff like that. I'll have all the other content to come for the rest of this week as well. Capsy, team selection, game week preview, transfer tips, and all that good stuff. If you haven't already, please do check out Patreon. Link in the description below if you want to check that out. Get some extra perks and benefits, Slack access, just support the channel, whatever your reasons might be. A big shout out to everybody that has already signed up. Much appreciated. I'll be back maybe later tonight, if not tomorrow, with another video. Enjoy the games that are left. There's still 2 to go. Hopefully there's some big points for Antonio and Dawson, but Declan Rice is a big miss. There's going to be lots of speculation now about West Ham. Hopefully we get some concrete info from David Moyes soon. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Give it a like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you soon.